This is working now. I'm going to sit here because we're going to go into the question and answer session. But first, I want to thank our outstanding panelists. There's nothing like hearing the story directly from those that have the experience. So thank you all again. You know, there's a whole lot of different definitions, and you might be a little confused. I mean, they're talking about the port single window and the trade facilitation window and the single electronic window and the single window for export. I visualize the single window as being my computer monitor. That's the window. Through that, you connect to all the stakeholders involved, whether you're the trader or your customs. I also love, you know, there's the old saying, what goes around comes around. And I just love the fact that Ghana hosted Mozambique, and they went and saw for themselves firsthand. And now Mozambique is hosting Malawi and Namibia and Botswana. I'm just wondering who you guys are going to host when you have yours up and running. So now we come to what my favorite part of the presentation, which is questions and answers. So I'd just like to open the floor to any questions for any of the panelists. I'd like you to traditionally identify who you are, who you're with, and to whom you're addressing the question. And we're going to take a question, answer, rather than a long list of questions first. So we have somebody out there with a mic to pass around. Oh, you got mics on your table. Okay, please don't be shy. Okay, the gentleman over here.
Good day, my name is Norbert Liebig from the Namibian Freight Forwarders Association.
I can't hear.
My name is Norbert Liebig from the Namibian Freight Forwarders Association. I'm very interested in costs. How is that model between the PPP worked out, and what does the entry cost? Thank you.
And to whom would you like to address this? Anyone in particular?
To one of the experts.
Okay, all right, well, that eliminates me. Would you like to address this, Mr. Darko?
In all the presentations that you've had, it talks about the benefits that have been gained. In the case of Mozambique, for instance, he talked about something that would have taken you 2-3 days and it's taken you 1 day. It obviously has a cost implication. So when you look at the benefits from that angle, you as a freight forwarder, for instance, how long does in Ghana, when it was taking you 3 weeks to get your goods from the port of Tema, the cost of pilfering, the cost of demurrage, the cost of possible breakages, the cost of possibly getting the container inadvertently being loaded onto the port of Lomé or the port of Tinkan Island in Nigeria. These are some of the costs. When you do the weighing, you see that the costs are fairly significant, and therefore, by implementing such a program, you make significant savings. As regard how to cost you from out of your pocket, in the case of Ghana, I believe in the case of Mozambique as well, it's a fee-paying model that ensures that in the fee paid for all the benefits that people inure to people, free training of freight forwarders, free training of government employees who have to access the system for the issuance of the permits, so that you as a freight forwarder, instead of shuttling to and fro to the free zone board, to the Environmental Protection Agency 3-4 times before you procure your permit, all this you could do that online, and for which reason you gain some savings. Those people will be trained freely, you are trained freely. The continuous sensitization and the fora that Mambo talked about, for instance, these are all hosted freely, and for that you pay only importers, in the case of Ghana, pay a fee. Exporters free. This is to promote that. It's a part of the trade facilitation goal, and in concept with Rick's vision of export-led growth. In the case of Ghana, nothing is paid for export whatsoever. So this is what it costs you, nothing. But weigh against the benefits, enormous.
Mr. Mambo, I've heard you respond to this in the past, so I'd like you to chip in, if you would, on what the fee structure is and the benefits, risk benefits in the Mozambique model.
Thank you. Ghana already answered to this question. What I will add to that is that this is why you need to have on board the private sector. because when you know, you need to balance. You need to establish a way to have the single window sustainable, working all the time, but you also need to look into the needs of private sector. So the private sector is owner of the system, will also participate in defining the costs. This is the approach we have used in Mozambique. Thank you.
And as a supplementary to that one, indeed it is critical that you get on board, because it becomes then a win-win situation for you as a shareholder, a stakeholder in the entity that drives the process. And as even from the dividend flows that come from it, you determine the fee that would also be done. So it is useful that the private sector participates on it. In the case of Ghana, all that they said was, oh, you take the lead, we'll join. Oh, you take the lead, they'll join. Today, they want to come on board. The initial owners are saying, look, wait a while, we'll open up shortly later.
I'd just like to add that when I met Mr. Patel last year, and he was telling me they were going to launch a single window in Mozambique, and he said, and it's being led by the private sector, I was skeptical. I know I'd seen a single window, and I knew it was customs and finance and immigration and veterinary and all of these government entities, and I thought, how on earth can the private sector drive this? Well, when I went over and found out that that was absolutely the case, that they had formed a public-private partnership, and the Mozambique Chamber of Commerce, CTA, actually has 20% equity in the single window, and they're looking out to their members to make sure that those prices stay very reasonable. And I talked to some of his members, and the basic response is, let me get this right. If I pay a fee for import on each declaration, I can get my goods out in 5 hours instead of 5 days. Where do I sign? So again, the overall savings far outweighs the manifest cost for each transactions. Good question though. Next question, please. I'm going to go with the lady in red. I believe that's Patricia. Julia Roberts. No, yeah, that's right. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Patricia Liswaniso from the Ministry of Trade and Industry in Namibia. I just want to appreciate the responses given, but from the budgeting point of view, I still find it difficult to come up with costing. You know, we are in the process of establishing a single window. And as I did my briefing to my politicians, what they were interested to know was the initial cost of this project. So that's what we want to know.
Again, the
investment.
Well, it depends upon your vision of and how you want to start. It will be useful, as it is quite an expensive outlay, it will be useful to start on a phased approach. You start from the critical stations and then you move out gradually, by which time you'll have earned some revenue so that the project itself will be self-financing. It also depends upon the number of users and the level of technology that you intend to use. Firstly, the technology. You have to make provision for the technology in terms of service, the networking arrangement, the networks that you have to deploy, the number of users and the PCs or the laptops that you have to use. For instance, we started with ordinary, I've forgotten the name, let's say PCs. Dumb terminals at some stage, we moved on to PCs. Now you have customs officers using Androids and smartphones to be able to, wherever they are, along the transit corridor, to monitor the movement of trucks. So it depends upon the initial investment outlay, at least the critical areas, the main port, what's the name of the port?
Walvis Bay.
Walvis Bay. Walvis Bay, for instance, would be a critical point. Therefore, all the initial investment might have to be focused on Walvis Bay, where you get immediate quick returns, where you're the critical areas where you collect most of the revenue, where most of the trade flows pass through, the airport, international airport, other regional centers where you think you have to be connected. You don't have to go on a big bang approach. Big bang would obviously lead to demands on the investment resource, the challenges that might not be prepared for. So these are some of the things that you have to. Obviously, you would require some level of technical know-how to be able to compute all these things, but I believe it should be possible for you to do it. Okay?
Mr. Weeboon, I see that you got your hand up. Please.
Perhaps I can add something. For GCNet and MCNet, they are PPP, which means that private and public both share the cost, right? So, but there are other forms of funding involved that can happen for single window. For example, there are funds from World Bank or Asia Development Bank, Africa Development Bank, for example, which can provide some funding. But the terms and conditions of this, you have to talk to them. So there are various ways, and for Crimson Logic, we have also invested as a private company to set up as well. So PPP, privately owned single window, or if you want fully funded, or the other way is the government owns the whole thing. So there are various ways and various approach.
Mr. Mambo, I know that you're the most recent entry, so you've written the most recent checks.
Thank you. For the case of Mozambique, I understand you want a figure. So depends on the scope of your single window, and depends on the various variables. For instance, in Mozambique, we had in customs a system that we could not reuse. So we said it should be part of the single window, the design and implementation of a new custom system. So TradeNet, yes, but you have to put together also a new custom system. That made the project a little bit more costly. Then we said we have around 50 customs offices all over the country with the whole computers. We don't want to reuse the computers because then the single window will not be, the availability will not be good. So we had to include 800 new computers just for customs. And then we said the communications are not very, very stable. So we need to put at least 2 links everywhere from 2 different suppliers. So everywhere we have 2 links, a fiber, a VSAT1 or other technology, everywhere. So because of that, our single window was, I will say in our terms, that was a little bit expensive. So the case of Mozambique is $12.7 million. For Namibia, maybe that is not a lot, but for Mozambique, that was budgeted, and we managed to accomplish all the project with around $13 million. So I repeat, that is not the cost of software. It's not. Software is about 30% of that. But we had to include training centers. We have created training centers in all provinces. We have deployed vehicles, at least 1 in each capital for support on the ground. We have created also support centers in capital. I mean, all of that is free for the user. All is free, including training, brochures. We have a web portal where you get exchange rates, legislation, you download whatever you want. All is free. So the only payment it's made is just a fee when you lodge a declaration. So the total project cost is $12.7 million. Thank you.
Well, that's a pretty good cost, figure. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Tingani Banda. I'm from Zambia Revenue Authority. My question centers around the actual implementation of the single window, particularly on aspects which relate to connecting with other border agencies. As you know, usually customs at the border is a step ahead in terms of level of automation. But the other agencies, not only those operating from the borders, including the government ministries, some of them are still operating manually in most environments. How did you handle those challenges, particularly to bring all these other border agencies to a level where you have an IT-enabled single window the way you projected it? Thank you.
As I indicated in the preliminary remarks, I said that we had to do our own. we had to deploy our own network infrastructure in all the various border agencies that we operated. In a situation where customs was using like radio powered by car batteries, and now you had to deploy a single window that you've assured all stakeholders that is going to operate on this 24/7 basis, that had to be deployed. In the case of Mozambique, we had to do different levels of networks of infrastructure, maybe just dedicated lease lines, VSAT, sometimes fiber optic cabling, so that in case you had enough redundancy and latency in the event that, let's say, something happens to one particular link, you should be able to pick up on the other link as well. For some of the agencies, like wherever customs is, there's immigration. Arrangements have been made whereby Ghana Immigration Service is piggybacking on the network that is available for them to transmit data to these agencies. For the other agencies that operate there also, they can also have, subject to their regulatory agencies, they can also have access to the system, or depending upon their institutional ways of doing things, availability of maybe they scanning the system, sending it to HQ for the necessary authorizations also to be issued. But the preference is that paperless, as much as possible, all entities are to come on board, access the system, scan as PDFs or whatever it is, and then go onto the system. Some of the agencies, like One Border Stations, there have been weeks on end where there's been no electricity. Everybody, all operating agencies within that particular border area have had to work on gensets that have been provided by GCNet. It's part of the sine qua non of all the operations there. At every station, certain critical infrastructural requirements will be there, ranging from, say, 150 kV at the main port to 40 kV at those outlandish ports. The power has to be there. We have to ensure that the drums of diesel are provided regularly. It's not a question of only deploying a system or providing the software. It's a total service. Total service in the sense of the fact that, like Madame said, firstly we go refurbish the place, providing the air conditioning, provide the security grids, provide the furniture and the fixings that are there. Twice a year, go paint the place where necessary. Create a congenial environment where both the users and the trade operators feel this is a different entity. It's part of the change management that you have to address. And that's why I find it difficult, Madam Namibia saying, this is the cost.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to just make a quick announcement, which is that all of the presentations that you've seen today will be available, I guess, on the Trade Hub website before the end of the conference. Oh, on the USBs. Okay, that's even better. Okay, so you'll get all these presentations. Also, I should mention that the report that Mr. Wieboon went over, that's available online as well, right? The report?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Also, the agenda that you have here, we're modifying a little bit. Rather than breaking into 3 different rooms afterwards and continuing these discussions, we're going to take a few more minutes here in open forum and then all sit together for lunch. So we do have a little bit of time for a few more questions. So where was I? I'll go way back in the back and then I'll come back to you, sir.
My name is Henry Menar. I'm from the NEPAD Business Foundation. I've worked in Ghana in a previous job with African Development Bank. I work currently in Mozambique. One of my questions is, and I know it was a problem with the Chirundi border post, one-stop border post, when they start implementation, they realize that they haven't done a lot of capacity building with the people. So what we're asking is, there's a nice word for corruption. Can somebody tell me what it is? I think it's some transfer payments or something, but how do you take care of that? Does the single window software and system help to make it more difficult for custom officials and people at the border post to take money, because there's a whole network of business and livelihoods at stake here. How do you manage that, and does it have a positive impact? Because the stories we've heard about Ghana, that it did have a positive impact and lessening the opportunities for these kind of activities. Thank you.
Okay, I think I understood the question, which is how does the introduction of a single window address unofficial fees at the borders? And before we get an answer, I just want to point out that Ghana mentioned that in the first year of its operations, its customs revenues increased by 50%. And it's my understanding that a large reason for that is because everything's on the computer, it's much more transparent, and it reduces the opportunity for seepage from outside the system. So the answer, it definitely does, but I'd like to give our experts to explain how.
Yes, I think the chairman has said it all. It plugged the loopholes in the system. The use of the computer plugged several loopholes in the system. It also reduced discretion of customs officers, you see. So where an agent would come to you and bargain with you, you know, now he couldn't because everything was computerized and there was no other way out but to do the right thing. So that is why eventually it led to the increase in revenue collection. So mainly it's because the computer system managed to plug the loopholes and also reduce the discretion that officers had previously. Thank you.
Yeah, you also talked about incidents of corruption. There are certain modules within the system like the vehicle valuation, where you just type in the chassis model of the vehicle. It tells you an indicative figure of the likely taxes and duties that you ought to pay. Where you are also procuring a permit or an exemption from a ministry, it is possible to check from what we call an e-services portal. I'm trying to procure a permit from Environmental Protection Agency or from the Free Zone Board. Once you submit the declaration, it tells you when it got to the Free Zone Board, which officer is handling it, how long it is taking him to handle that process, when did he give, what do you call it, a provisional approval or a final approval. So where there's any question of about somebody trying to extort, it's easy to track that process. That why is it that it took only 3 minutes for the system to be validated in the system. It was forwarded to maybe EPA, Free Zone Board, etc., GIPC, Investment Promotion Center, but it took 2 days there. What happened? It is easy to track. For the payment of rent seeking, it is inevitable. Like, for instance, a transit truck is along the corridor. A policeman decides, without access to the system, decides to stop the truck or whatever it is. If a complaint is raised, it is possible to prove that it crossed a certain a checkpoint at a certain hour, but it got delayed because there was some policeman or some assembly overzealous official has decided to make an intervention. For what reason he made that intervention, I think it is possible to track and sanction that particular officer. As you start the process as well, I think this is one area that is critical that Mambo talked about the benefits of a latter developer. These are some of the things that have to be done. The system will tell you who a recalcitrant offender is. The system will tell you who is being obstructive. Please go ahead and sanction those people. It acts as a deterrent that it tells you that there's a system, it is possible to prove that you did this, you did that at this point in time. So take advantage of the tool that it provides to be able to sanction so that the benefits that it needs for deploying such systems are not undermined by recalcitrant officers who try to take advantage of it or who try to still continue to line their pockets.
Mr. Marbo, did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add. Yes, I just wanted to add that you have to put in place a good post-event or post-clearance system, you know, which will involve auditing the transactions that are in the system, either online as they are taking place or after they have taken place. Now, if customs officers know that their actions are being monitored or whatever they do will be seen in the future, I think that it will prevent some of these things from happening. But you must have a good post-event or post-clearance audit unit in place. That can also contribute to the reduction in the rent seeking of customs officers.
Okay. Okay, I'm only going to be able to take one more question, but I'd like to point out that our experts are going to be around for today and tomorrow, and please feel free to tug them on their sleeve at the tea break or over lunch and ask the questions. You might have some that are you don't want to ask in front of 120 people. So they will be here. So one more question, and then I'm going to do a quick wrap up, and we'll be headed to lunch momentarily. So who would? Okay. I can't. The hand that I'm in the back there. I can't see who's attached to it, but I see it raised. So the hand back here.
Thank you. My name is Audrey Mwela. I'm from Malawi. I work for the PPP unit. So naturally, I'm interested in understanding the PPP concept in this scenario. I was just wondering, I've seen that it's actually a very large kind of investment. It affects several layers, and I was just interested to just understand a little more from probably both Mozambique and Ghana. When you're saying you implemented this using a PPP model, I was just curious to understand the scope. You have the basic IT infrastructure where you talked about the fiber optic cable. I think that's, in fact, in Malawi, we're having a PPP project just for that alone. And then you now move to the hardware itself, but also the software. So I was just wondering, when you're saying you've implemented your single window program using PPP, what was the scope? Was it one PPP contract, or you had several? And secondly, I was also interested to find out what was the scope as well in terms of the PPP joint venture itself. I think you mentioned the government has, I think it was Mozambique, you mentioned government has 20%. So in that special purpose vehicle, does it include, is it only in terms of investment in the infrastructure or probably software as well, or it also extends to management of the system in some kind? So in that case, I was interested to find out whether this PPP as a special purpose vehicle, does it generate revenue on its own, or government pays it as a rate payment? Thank you.
Mr. Maba, please.
Thank you. I think we can, during the break, discuss more, but I will in general tell you that the case of Mozambique is based on the reality on the ground. The government decided to launch a tender to identify a strategic partner for this project. So we had the private sector and the government, but there was a need for somebody else with know-how and finance to finance initial financing of the project. So this is what the approach that was used. I think it's probably a little bit different in Ghana. So the PPP created, MCNet, is responsible for all aspects of the project, starting from the design, implementation, and operation of the system. And also, in the case of Mozambique, this PPP is a BOT, so it's a 15 years. During 15 years, is responsible for managing the single window. That is the approach taken. So it means that after 15 years, the government can decide that the know-how is sufficient within the government, can run it or can extend it. But so the government is one of the shareholders and share all the risk and all the, I mean, anything that is missing or is not working, the whole shareholder sits together and no one to blame out of the PPP. So they're all together and they're all responsible. Thank you.
And I'd like to add that we at USAID are strong advocates of the PPP model for this reason. One, well, I don't think he mentioned they went out for a tender to find a private partner to come in and join with them. So it's a competitive process. But then they brought a partner that, one, knew how to build a single window, had a lot of experience, and had done it already, where they had not. Two, they had a partner to put up the money to buy this equipment and to make the investment. Three, the partnership not only brought in the expert, I think in your instance it was SGS from Switzerland, but it also brought in the private sector CTA as an equity holder. I believe the position is it's 60% the private company, 20% the Chamber of Commerce, and 20% the government. So that entity does collect revenues for the declarations that clears, but again, that's a small share of the savings that come to the people that use it. And then after 15 years in this instance, they turn it over to the government, and it just seems to be such a better way than trying to struggle along and figure out how to do it on your own or with donor consultants, to tell the truth. And I have been notified by our Masters of Ceremonies that due to popular demand, we can accept a couple more questions. So I did see another one. I'll start right here, and then I'll come back to you. Please, sir.
Thank you, Rick, and to your panel. My name is Botsang. I'm from the Cross Border Road Transport Agency in South Africa. Just a short one. Obviously, the model was intended to improve and increase the free flow of traffic across our borders and across the continents. And I want to specifically ask this question looking at the road traffic, from one border post to another border post. And I may use Rasanokasia in Mozambique to Lebombo border post in South Africa. On one side of Mozambique, in this instance, you will obviously have the single window system operating and functionally very well. But I'm just concerned about the delays when the receiving or the corresponding country does not have the same system. What solutions does the system have in addressing these challenges? And let me use a simple example. 17 trucks used to be cleared in Rasanokasia over 30 days before. Now, because of this system, that happens within a day. And the corresponding country, in this instance, South Africa, does not have the same system. So you clear 17 trucks in one day, and they are stuck in between the two border posts. What is the solution towards that? Thank you.
The solution, develop a single window as well.
So did you all catch that? Solution is for you to have a single window in both countries on both sides of the border. So there you go.
I think let's
Mr. Bombo, please. You're on one side of that border. What do you do?
Yes, let me answer to your question. Like it was presented this morning, the Asian countries putting together national single windows, and then putting together national single windows, and then joining the national single window to make a regional single window. We have now a national single window, and then now we move it to a step where we need to exchange information with the neighbors. Just for your information, we had a few meetings already with the SARS, and we're going to have very soon others where we discuss how to interconnect and how to exchange information to avoid the trucks stopping and waiting at the border. And we have progressed a lot. We hope we can very soon have that exchange of information to make easy the life at the border. So it's something we are addressing now. And we had also similar meetings with Malawi. Malawi colleagues are here. We went to Malawi, we had similar meetings. I recognize the Commissioner Custom from Swaziland is there. We also went to Swaziland. We went to Zimbabwe and to Zambia. And the issue is how we can exchange information in a more quick way without delaying the traffic at the border. So we are working on that now. Thank you.
I think one of the ways we've sought to address it is that with our neighboring countries who don't have such systems, is that they have Burkina Faso, for instance, has the Burkina Shippers Authority and Customs Post at the Tema Port, so that we upload the data to them and then they pass it on into their Asikuda system in Ouagadougou, or in the Cape Proud to Cote d'Ivoire having its civil crisis, Cote d'Ivoire also lifting the data at the Lubu and then passing it into their system in Abidjan. But the ideal situation is to have interfaces at the various border points and eventually even having a common joint border position. In our case, it's quite ludicrous to have at our flower border with Togo on the other side. Barely 100 meters away, you go through Ghana, you go into a bit of no man's land, and there it's one of the areas that I think could emanate advantage of a latter developer, particularly in the Southern African region, is to have agencies like the Trade Hub, USAID, and policy institutions, for instance, to drive the process. This is how we can help you to build joint border posts. This is how we can help you to do the interfaces so that such border crossings, such data exchanges can be done expeditiously.
Okay, the final question. Okay, the lady sitting behind. Oh wait, who, please? Yes, please.
I've actually not got a question. My name is Louise Wiggett and I'm from Trade and Public Sector. I just want to pay a compliment to Mr. Mambo and the Mozambique team. They have been fantastic to work with. So really, to answer the question of the gentleman from South Africa, I think we need a single window. So.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up with that testimonial, but you'll have plenty. All right, one more. You're pretty enthusiastic. One last question here, and then I'm going to do a wrap.
I didn't understand. Thank you. My name is Joseph Msariri. I'm with the Federation of Clearing and Forwarding Associations of Southern Africa. It's a question, but I don't know who would answer that. It would probably be directed to SADC, because my comment would be that I think this is an important initiative that probably needs to be taken as a policy issue at SADC level. So if it could be adopted at SADC level so that the heads of customs, at least these are the main, I think in terms of being champions of this project, I think customs are the target. With the exceptions of probably Mozambique, where the private sector was leading. So I think SADC would be the best lead in this respect. Thank you.
Okay, I can address that. I have been in discussions with both SADC, the SADC Secretariat, as well as with SACU on trade facilitation issues. And we would very much like to see both organizations endorse the single window and these other trade facilitations tools for adoption by their members on a voluntary basis. Certainly can't impose and make somebody do that. But I met with Mr. Willie Shumba last week. They are hosting an ITC conference in Mauritius next month. And I believe Mr. Mambo is going to go there and talk to them about the single window so that they can consider that as part of the SADC. Mr. Mambo, Mr. Shumba, would you like to address this? Mr. Shumba is SADC, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. I think what Joseph has raised is a very pertinent issue. And in response, what I can say is, the last meeting of the Subcommittee on Customs Cooperation held its meeting in June. And one of the issues that they had an opportunity to consider was the single window. And they came up with the resolution that the region needs to adopt a single window concept in order to facilitate trade. And as a result of that meeting, coming out of that meeting, we hope the national customs administrations will then be able to come up with national decisions on that. But as SADC Secretariat, they also gave us some work to do, and we are in the process of attending to a few issues which came out of that. Thank you.
Okay, so SADC sounds like they're on board. Now it's up to the individual member countries. And I'd like to wrap up by again saying that if any of the countries represented here today are interested in learning more or moving forward, USAID is pleased to work with the SADC members that are here today to help them work out the next steps to go forward. But it's a facilitation role. This needs to be pushed and adopted by the member countries and by their private sectors. In that regard, I'm going to try to give a wrap-up of what we've heard here today. First of all, I think it's clear that, I guess you can say a single window is not a destination, but a journey. You can start building your single window, but you'll never finish. We heard from Singapore, got a lead back in 1989, and they continue to improve and enhance what they're doing. But it's a journey well worth making. I think everybody made it clear that it's not easy, that there are a number of challenges, but you've heard from everybody that I've talked to that is involved and actually has a single window talks about the dramatic benefits that they've had. I think in terms of overall summary, one of Mr. Mambo's last slides told the lessons learned, and I'd like to just distribute that as a wrap-up. You know, the customs is the core, the heart, the soul of single windows throughout the world. But it's not customs alone. It needs to be not only whole of government and all of the relevant stakeholders, but the private sector needs to get involved early on, have a seat at the table, be the champion. It's you, the private sector, that benefits from it, and you need to let your governments know that you want this and you're willing to work with them to apply it. So if you're willing to go down that road, the main thing that in my conclusion is, I'm going to stop using that Thailand slide. From now I'm using the Ghana slide. Ghana, 50% increase in revenue in the first year. And I have some figures here that Mr. Darko wrote down for me. They reduced the time and cost of trading, importing, and exporting by 60% their first year. 60% reduction in the time and cost. That's your private sector savings right there. Now, 2004, 2005, an additional 42%. 2006, 5-6, 31%. 7-9, 25%. This past year, 44%. So not only did they get a 60% reduction in the time and cost the first year, they have continued to reduce the time and cost every year of its operations. So the general wrap-up is, it isn't easy, but it's well worth the effort. Now, that's a wrap of this session.